on the computer. So Jinna, welcome to the debriefing session, and congratulations on scoring 760. We talked about it. You said Q49, V44, excellent score in verbal, 98th percentile, and then really good score in quant as well. So how does it feel?
It feels like a big weight has been lifted off my shoulders because I've been studying for this test for a very long time. I think in general, I've studied a lot longer than the average person would study. So actively, I've studied for 11 months.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, it was it was a lot longer than the average, but um, those 11 months were within about 1.5 years total.
Okay.
So so they were like split a little bit within those 1.5 years, but active studying was about a total of 11 months.
So I want to
And
ask this.
so,
I want to ask this question. Since you're a very unique student, you're 22, you're yet to join your first job, and you've been studying for this test for 11 months. So what prompted you to study for it now?
I knew that I was going into the finance field. So I just started my first job
Mhm.
as a valuations associate. And so it's a career in finance. And I knew that in the future, I would want to get an MBA, and I just wanted to leave that option open for me and get the test out of the way, so that I wouldn't have to study while I was working. Because for me, standardized tests are really, really difficult. Like, I had so much trouble with the SAT. I studied for that for like 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And so I really wanted to get a jump on the GMAT, because I knew I would have trouble doing it while I was working.
So do you mind telling me your SAT percentile or SAT score?
Oh, my SAT, I got a 2270.
Okay, and what percentile does that translate into?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember. I think it may have been like 97th or something.
Okay.
97th or 98th.
All right. So you're in the top 1 percentile now. So this must feel better now than what it did. 27, 20 to 70
Yeah,
is an excellent score, but this is better.
yeah, it's especially because I did most of the studying on the GMAT on my own, but for the SAT, I had to get private tutors, because it just wasn't going through. But the thing about me is that I don't take the test until I know I can score really high. So that's why the GMAT took me so long. I could have stopped, when I hit 700, but it's not the kind of person I am. I want to get that extremely high score. And so that's why I was willing to study for a lot longer.
That's a trait of people who get to that score. I mean, you've got to be willing to put in that effort. You've got to, I mean, because the
Absolutely.
delta is that piece, that those extra months that you put in. So let's talk about it. So you bought the e-GMAT course some time back. What prompted you to make that purchase?
Um, so I realized that in my practice test, one of the areas I was struggling in was sentence correction,
Hmm.
but that was surprising to me because I consider myself pretty good at grammar. And so I wasn't sure why I was missing so much on sentence correction every test. So clearly, like, I was missing something in terms of sentence correction on the GMAT. And I read on some GMAT online forums that the e-GMAT sentence correction program was really, really helpful. And so that's why I purchased it. And so my intention was to go through all of the videos and all of the written exercises, and lesson plans as well, and just to start over like fresh from scratch and pretend that I don't know anything about grammar. Um, and that really helped me. Like, I was missing, before I did the program, I was missing probably like seven sentence correction per test, but after only doing e-GMAT sentence correction for about a month, I got that number down to like 3 or 4. And so I saw a significant improvement after only a month. And I wasn't even done with the program. It took a while, so I was probably only like halfway to 70% done with the program. But I already had seen like a really large improvement.
So
So
you
that was my strategy.
so you were really good in grammar. I mean, you had this incredible 97, 98th percentile on the SAT. So what was the difference and as you went through the course, what were you doing differently?
Um, I think with the GMAT, I had a lot of trouble with modifiers. I think that was one of the main things that was holding me back. Um, and like modifiers, I found really tricky, even when I was going through the e-GMAT lesson plans. But having the mindset of starting from scratch and pretending that like I've never heard about these grammar concepts before helps me to like get rid of any preconceptions that I had, whether they were wrong or right. So I just decided I would learn from scratch in the program and just do what the program told me to and think the way that the program wanted me to think. And that honestly was what improved my score in sentence correction in the end.
Got it. Okay. You also practice stuff from Scholaranium. How did you utilize that?
Um, I basically just went with the lesson plan. So there were quizzes right at the end of lesson plans and at the end of chapters. And after the quizzes, I would go to Scholarium and do maybe a set of like 10 and just see how I improved after each lesson plan. And at the end, after I finished all the lesson plans, I would solely practice from Scholarium to see, where I was still lacking
Got it.
in skill a little bit. And that also really helped me improve my score just to see where my weaknesses were at and where my strengths were at.
Okay. Now, as you went, so after going through the e-GMAT course, when you solve sentence correction question, did you kind of get in the habit of looking for meaning? What is it the author's trying to say?
Yeah, definitely. So e-GMAT definitely helped me to like understand the importance of looking for meaning, but also logic. And I think that the looking for logic part was the part I was struggling with. Um, the most. So for like logical prediction problems and like logical grammatical errors that I was having a lot of trouble finding because I don't consider myself a person who thinks very logically. And so that was something that I really, really had to work at. But e-GMAT really helped me to get there. I think it was just a matter of thinking in a different way, and it
The
was also a
mindset.
matter of practicing that thinking over and over again.
Okay, so then we think talking about logic. So did you take your logic part to that the same logical approach to critical reasoning as well?
For me, critical reasoning was a whole other beast.
Okay.
It was the section that I had the most trouble in. I think in the entire GMAT. When I first started, I could spend like 10 minutes on a question, and I would still not understand why my answer was wrong and the correct answer was right because I just wasn't used to thinking that way. Um, but I eventually figured out some of the tips and tricks associated with certain critical reasoning questions and like what to look for also through the e-GMAT program because I think I think probably my thinking was off, but also I didn't know what to look for in these questions, and I thought that that was a really crucial part. Also, the idea of pre-thinking
Mhm.
was new to me as well and brought to my attention through e-GMAT. But even after it was brought to my attention that this was something I had to do, I didn't know how to do it. Um, and that took a lot of practice as well, finding the assumptions, how to find the assumptions as like the first step. I just wasn't used to thinking that way. And so that also took a lot of time for me.
So, but once you went there, and I understand it's a struggle to get to that point, but once you got to that point where you say, okay, I'm now starting to be able to pre-think assumptions. How was that feeling?
Um, it was a really good feeling. It felt like I had cracked through a wall that I kept on hitting before I realized like that was something that I could do. I didn't think I could do it until I actually did it, but it took a lot of practice to get there. But the thing about scoring above a 750 is that um, you can't only rely on pre-thinking either. And even after I got through to like how to pre-think and how to figure out what the assumptions were, I was still missing a couple, and that was all about understanding the types of questions I was being asked and how to approach each different type of question. And I think that practice with that and also with pre-thinking combined is what got me to the score that I got in the end, because
Oh,
I
absolutely.
realized that
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, because I realized it wasn't enough to just pre-think the questions.
Yeah, I think it's about, remember this, 760 is 99 percentile, which means you
Yeah.
pretty much have all the gaps covered. So pre-thinking is this one unified framework that really gets you to that point, but then still you'd have those gaps where you say, okay, when you see a certain answer statement,
Yeah.
how do you decipher that meaning? You see that some one word that's put in over there that can change the entire meaning of the statement. You've got to still be able to do that. Bold-faced questions, I mean, you have 2-3 level logic in a certain answer statement. You know, this is
Hmm.
a fact which is disputed by a conclusion that the argument supports. It's like it's a 3 level statement. How do you decipher that and put it in that context? You
Yeah.
still have to build that skill.
And I was really careful also to start with easy questions and make sure that I got all the easy questions right and then move on to medium and then hard level questions. Um, when I was first starting to prepare the GMAT, I wanted to do just the hard questions so I could study quicker, but that wasn't working for me. And I realized that I had to be humble in tackling this test, and I had to start from the easy, make sure I got 90 to 100% of those correct, and then move on to the medium, try to get 70 to 80% of those correct, and then move on to hard. And my hard goal was about 60 to 70%.
How did you get those metrics?
How did I get those metrics?
Yeah.
Um, I read a little bit on the e-GMAT forums, and also on some of the other GMAT forums online. Also, those are the metrics for target test prep, and so that's also where I got those from.
Mm.
Um, and then there was something else I wanted to say. uh,
No,
I
the reason I'm
forgot.
saying is because
Oh,
those are exactly the same metrics that we provide to our students.
oh, really? Yeah.
Yes, yes, and because we have these stats internally where on our YouTube channel there is this playlist which says data predicts success, and
Hmm.
where within our portal we have these tight data bands where if people score in those bands, we can say with about 99% certainty what their score range is going to be within 30 points.
Yeah.
So
But what I realized also was that the harder questions, what made them hard was the answer choices. It wasn't as much the question as the answer choices. And so that was another wall for me, how to differentiate the answer choices and how to figure out how they contribute to the argument. And my test was originally scheduled for the end of March this year, but because of COVID, everything got canceled, and so I ended up having a lot more time to study. And during those months, that was what I tackled was how do I figure out and differentiate the hard answer choices, um, and figure out what the correct one was. And so that also took a little bit of time. What I found was that the harder questions take more time to figure out, and in general, just a lot more practice. And so what I did was I gathered all the official guide materials that I could. And in addition to Scholarium, I practiced the hard questions from the official guides and tried to figure out, what I was missing in those questions. In the end, I raised my goal from getting 60 to 70% of hard questions correct to 70 to 80% to ensure success before I took the GMAT. And so I decided I wanted to raise the bar for myself even higher because I knew that I would be anxious during the test, and that would probably improve, affect my performance as well. In addition, I didn't know how the online test was going to be. And so that's also a strategy that I did.
So you kind of made this point. I want to just kind of go back to that. You said your test was originally scheduled in March, and
Yeah.
then you, because of COVID, you moved it, and that gave you extra time. So
Hmm.
in March, would you have settled for a lesser score? I
In
mean, because
March,
you didn't need this improvement, right? So I'm just wondering, had COVID not happened, would you have been happy with the 730, for example?
It's funny you say that because that's probably the score I would have gotten back in March was probably a 730. I would have settled for it, yeah, because I was just so tired of studying at that point. I was also doing school at the same time, so I think I would have been okay with it. But now I also didn't think that I could get a 760.
Okay.
But another strategy that I took in terms of this test was I studied every single day. And I never went more than 2 days without studying because I wanted the material to be fresh in my mind.
Mhm.
And I think that that's like something that's really hard to keep up for a lot of people, but for me, it was essential to getting a 760. If between those months of March and the end of June, I wasn't studying every day, I probably wouldn't have gotten the score that I have today.
Got it. Makes sense. I completely agree with it. So what what so I think one last question about your GMAT preparation, then we'll go on to the MBA
Mhm.
side. Uh, so what were you getting on the official mocks? Did you take official mocks, by the way?
Yeah, yeah, I did.
And what were you scoring there?
I was scoring about 750. That was probably my highest. And so the fact that I got a 760 on the actual test was a shock. I didn't expect that. But obviously it was a nice surprise. And another thing that I did was I always reset my official tests. And I know that gives you an inaccurate score because you've already seen some of the questions. But for me, it was more about more practice, with the structure of the test and with the timing and with the pressure. I think that that's a really important part of the test too, not just doing practice problems on the side, but also getting used to how long the test takes, and also getting used to like the timing of it all. Also, even though you would see some repeats, you would also see a lot of new questions pop up.
On the
And
first and second one, not the three, four, five, and six.
oh no, you can reset those too.
Yeah, but I mean there aren't that many new one, three, four, five, and six. The first and second, they have a huge question bank.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but I reset all of them. And I did find like a couple new ones, at least in the three, four, five, and six. And so that helped as well. I would just say like take the retakes scores with a grain of salt and just like do those as practice for the timing and the pressure of the test.
That's true. So let's talk about this one last thing. This is, I think, post your GMAT. So you got the 760, higher than any mock score you ever got. What did you do to celebrate?
What did I do? um, I treated myself to a very nice dinner.
Hmm.
And I've decided
How? I
that
mean, you went out?
no, we got takeout.
Okay.
So we got food delivered from a really nice place. And I decided that for like the next month or so, like I'm not going to do anything productive besides work because obviously I have to do work. But after work, I'm just gonna relax, because this has been such a weight on my shoulder for so long that I think I didn't realize, but it actually also took a mental toll on me.
I can.
After the test, instead of feeling like really happy and really energized, I actually felt sick. And I think that that was probably because I didn't realize like how much stress it had on my body, and I think it's going to take a while to actually recover from that.
So, I mean, are you getting more sleep now, or?
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely feeling more rested, and more relaxed every day. Like back then, I was on high alert every day, and I felt like, oh, I have to study every day. I need to get this done. But now it's a lot better.
And so, who was the happiest in amongst the people around you when you got this score, other than yourself?
Um, my parents were really happy for me. My boyfriend was really happy for me because he had seen how hard I've been studying recently. Um,
Sacrifices
and
also on his part, I'm assuming.
I'm sorry.
Sacrifices also on his part. You probably couldn't.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I was really happy because I really I didn't even think I could score in the 99th percentile. That was something that was like just beyond my understanding when I first started studying. I was thinking like, all right, 730, let's go, and then I'd be happy with that. But this is amazing because the median scores for the top MBA schools in the world are in like the 730, and so that puts me in a really good position, and that makes me really happy.
Okay, let's talk about this. So you have some questions about how can you position yourself? So why don't you go ahead with those questions?
Um, well, beyond the GMAT, I haven't done any research on like how to apply to MBA schools just because I'm really young and I don't plan on doing it for at least a couple of years. And so I was wondering if you could give me some insight on the application process in general.
So I can tell you, but I think, I mean, it's it's in structurally it's very different from the application process that you had for your undergrad program, where you uh, for your undergrad you probably had a statement of purpose and then you had your SAT
Yeah.
score. I don't know if you had if there was an interview, but I mean, I guess that's kind of what it is at a very high level. So structurally, it's different because now you have about 3 to 4 essays. You have a few letter of recommendations. You have definitely have an interview, and then you have your resume. So it looks very different, but uh, from a from an intent standpoint, it's not very different. So when you think about the SOP that you had in your undergrad program, the purpose of that SOP was they wanted to know you who Jinna as an individual is. And the intent of these essays, the intent of these letter of recommendations, that intent is to really figure out who Jinna as a person is through the accomplishments that she has had in her professional life, as well as in the personal life if you have significant extracurriculars. And I would not, right now, if I were you, I would not focus on the structure of this. What I would really worry about is what qualities should I be able to portray through my experience that will put me in a good place to get there. So given where you are, I think you have a huge advantage over those who'd be thinking about it 3 years from now, because you can now plan your career. So one of the big things that B schools look for is this thing called leadership. And a lot of people think leadership is about having managerial responsibilities. Leadership is about having people reporting to you. No, leadership isn't about that. Leadership is about navigating change and navigating through change, but not just by yourself, but also bringing people along with you. So in your role, for example, you said you were in some sort of evaluation right now.
Yeah, I'm a evaluations associate.
Your evaluation. So presumably, the companies that Anderson funds, you want to really check the evaluation. You probably get their financial reports, and is that what you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so so if, for example, I'm sure they have some set processes in place that they do to really kind of get to a certain standard valuation. Now, if you
Yeah.
can enhance some of those processes, and enhancements can happen in two ways, at least two that I know of. I'm sure there are others. One is, let the process be the same. You make it more efficient by automating certain steps. The second is to make the process more accurate, because I mean, the companies that you fund, and not all of them become successful. Some of them become uber successful, others don't. So I'm sure there are variables that can be added to the model to really make the valuation more precise. So if you're able to do this either way, and I'm not saying tomorrow you go and you'll be able to do it, but over the course of a year, that is leadership. Why? Because it's not just that you really say, I'm going to tweak this and I'm going to make it more efficient, but you'd have to prove it to others. You'd have to make sure that others believe in what you've done, and then use those numbers to make decisions going forward. So that's one way of showing leadership. Another way of showing leadership is if you get so good at doing valuations that they allow you to kind of move further along on the food chain. That is
Hmm.
showing leadership. So when it comes to the application, these are the experience. If you have those experiences by the time you get to writing your essays, then you'll have a lot of meat to write those essays. And that's kind of what I will tell you. So do well in your professional life. have significant achievements. Now, if you have those achievements, your letter of recommendation would also fall into place. So that's in a nutshell. What is what?
Okay. So I also have a question about letters of recommendation then. So do they usually come from your boss, your old professor? Like where do people typically?
Ideally, the principle is they should know you. Okay. So there should be at least one professional letter of recommendation, at least one. And if there can be two, that's good. But I mean, I have seen people submit one from the professor and one from their current boss. So
Okay.
yeah,
I see. So it's typically two.
typically two, yes.
And I've heard like there are several rounds of admissions. Like there's
Round
like
one,
a
R2, R3, yes. And this year is
yeah,
even a round four, by the way.
yeah. And so how did those work? Like where would I want to submit? Like
One,
which stage would I want to
one,
submit?
one.
One.
One's always better than two, although the difference is not huge, but one's typically better than two. So from an admission standpoint, very similar. I mean, probably one's 5% better than two from an admission standpoint. From a scholarship standpoint, I think there's substantially more money in one than in two, round one than in round two.
I see.
Hmm.
Is it like a rolling basis that they admit you?
So there's it's these are, think of them as more milestones than rolling, where round one has a deadline. You apply till round one, and
Hmm.
and then there's a hard stop, and then they analyze the applications. So let's say Harvard has a class of 1,000 students. So they have
Hmm.
this goal to really say end of round one, we're going to probably make offer to about 800 students. We know our acceptance is about 80%. So 80% of those 800, which is 640 students, would accept. Then we're going to keep round two, and we're going to give an offer to another 600, 700 students over there. And then we know the acceptance is probably a bit higher in round two. So that's how we're going to fill up. Harvard no longer does round three, or did not do round three prior to COVID. So actually, it's interesting. 2019, Harvard said we're going to not do round three. So because we typically get students now. Most other business schools do round three. So they kind of split their applicant pool, but the biggest pool is taken in round one.
Oh, okay. I see. And in terms of like the scholarships, how do schools decide, who to give those to?
So there are two kinds of scholarships that are there. There's one is called merit-based scholarships, and the second is those special category scholarships. That actually the three kinds, I should say: merit-based, special category, needs-based. 80% of all the scholarship money is for merit-based, which means you could be the richest person, but you would deserve to get a scholarship based on your merit. You would get it. So the merit-based scholarships are decided on GMAT score and how much they love you during the interview. So
I
those two,
see.
primarily those two things. The need-based scholarships, of course, financial need, and the special category ones, if you fall in those special categories, where for India there is this scholarship where big industrialists have sponsored scholarships for people who've been from a certain background and want to do an MBA in the US and then want to come back over there, and so those are about 10% each, but the bulk of scholarship money is merit-based.
How long would you say these personal statements take so I know when to start writing them?
Um, if you have, depends on whether you're working with someone, whether you're working on your own. If you're working with an admission consultant, I would say the application part, probably 40 days is what it would take, given all the iterations. But they can also be very, very aware that letters of recommendation depend on the availability of your recommender. So I would probably start 60 to 70 days prior to the deadline, at least. Actually, if I were you, I would start even sooner. I would start sometime so May is when I think schools start to really give their applications out. I would actually hire a consultant sometime in April or March, because that's where when the prices are the cheapest, because they
Okay.
don't have a whole lot of business there. So you can always hire them and start working with them in May.
Okay. I
So
see. And for someone in my position, the GMAT score is only good for 5 years. When would you suggest I go back to school?
usually it's a personal decision. I would just say that. I so
Okay.
I mean, I'll tell you my story. I never wanted to do an MBA. I hated the notion of doing an MBA. I'm an engineer. I have a master's degree in engineering, not just a bachelor's degree. And I was like, I was of the opinion that MBA is only for people who are not good engineers. That's kind of how I mean, what my mindset was. Everyone around me said, you've got to do an MBA, because I was also very good in extracurriculars. But I was like, no, I'm never going to do an MBA. That was my notion. So, but a year and a half into my first job, I kind of realized, man, I need the power to make decisions. I need to be able to justify what products to build. And that's when I kind of had a purpose of doing an MBA. And so for me, 2 years into this, I was like, I've got to do an MBA. I was very, very firm on that. For certain other people, that happens 5 years, 6 years down the line. So I think start working. There will be things that you would feel that, okay, I can do better at, but I don't have the skill set. And when those start to become a major impediment, which, if you are truly progressing, they will, then you would know this is the time to do an MBA.
Okay.
The nice thing about this litmus test is that this happens only when you've done enough, that you've utilized your current skill set, and so you already have a good chunk of material to write in those essays. So I mean, things start to fall in place when you get that feeling.
Okay. I see. Um, I don't think I have any more questions at
Oh,
this
that's
point.
good. That's good. I think you started early. You're in a great place with an amazing score. I don't see 760 uh, becoming 98 percentile in the near future. But even if it does become 98 percentile in the near future, who cares? It's still a great score. So so good luck, and keep me posted as to when you plan to apply.
Yeah, I will. Thank you so much.